A young boy from California would move to Montana after his parents got divorced and would exhibit unusual behavior that would have him sent to his grandparents' house, where his murderous spree would start. He would then kill, decapitate, remove the hands of, and rape 8 more women. It wasn't until a call from a phone booth in Pueblo, Colorado, that police were able to make any headway. Edmund Kemper, known to friends as Big Ed, was born on December 18, 1948, in Burbank, California, the middle child of E.E. and Clarnell Kemper. His parents divorced early in his life, and Clarnell would move him and his 2 sisters to Montana. His mother, despite having full custody, was not a model parent. She was an alcoholic and extremely emotionally abusive to Kemper, forcing him to live in the basement of their house out of fear of him hurting the rest of the family. That fear would later be revealed to not be unfounded. In his early years, Kemper's games were very dark, pretending to be a gas chamber victim and cutting the heads off his sister's dolls. At the age of 10, he would take his first 2 lives, 2 of the family cats. The first he buried alive, the second he stabbed to death. Kemper's behavior would lead to him being shuffled around his parents' households until he was finally put up in his parental grandparents' farm at the age of 15. He despised it there and would eventually get access to a firearm. After shooting several birds and other small animals, his grandparents took away his gun. Enraged, he took the gun and killed his grandmother to see what it would feel like to kill a human. When his grandfather came home, not wanting him to see his wife dead, he shot him too. He would be arrested and was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia when they ran diagnostics on him. Sources also like to point out that he had a high IQ, as if smart people can't commit crimes. He would be sent to Atascadero State Hospital, a maximum security detention center for mentally ill convicts. In 1969, he would be released from the detention center at the age of 21, where he would return to living with his mother even though his psychiatrist strongly recommended against it. He would begin looking for a career, originally interested in being a state trooper. He would be denied the role due to him being too big, 6'9" and approximately 300 pounds. He would become very buddy-buddy with the troopers there, though, who allegedly gave him handcuffs and a gun and what? Chekhov, what are you doing here? I'm in the middle of filming a video. Please, get out of here. Get out. God. He would end up finding a position working for the highway department, developing a good sense of the Santa Cruz roads. Please stop coming in. While on his motorcycle on the highway, he would be hit by a car, injuring him enough to take him out of the job and receiving $15,000 in settlement money. Now sitting without anything to do, Kemper's mind starts to wander. He would buy a car with a settlement and stuff handcuffs, a knife, and a gun into the trunk of the car. He would start picking up and dropping off hitchhiking women, but on May 7, 1972, 2 girls he picked up wouldn't return home. Marianne Pasha and Anita Lucchesa were both freshmen at Fresno State University, looking ahead to Stanford University. Kemper picked the 2 girls up and would drive for a while before handcuffing Pasha and locking Lucchesa in his trunk. He would stab and strangle both women to death before driving them home to his apartment, where he would dismember their heads and hands and rape them, what would soon become his calling card, before disposing of their bodies. In August of that year, Pasha's skull would be found, the only remains of the woman to be found. His next victim was a 15-year-old girl, Heiko Koo. On September 14th, after missing the bus to her dance class, she would try to hitchhike there. Kemper picked her up, shot, raped, dismembered, and disposed of her. Cindy Shaw, a student at Cabrillo College, would meet the exact same fate, except Kemper would keep Shaw's head for several days, raping it before burying it in his mother's backyard, having it positioned so it was looking up at his mother's bedroom window. At this point, the press had caught wind of Kemper's pattern, distinguishing him enough from the 2 other serial killers active at this time in Santa Cruz, John Linley Frazier and Herbert Mullins. The 3 would make Santa Cruz known as the murder capital of the world, and the press would call Kemper the co-ed killer. which is not a pun, no matter how much I want it to be. Word of the murders had spread like wildfire, and authorities advised people to only hitchhike in vehicles marked with their university stickers. Kemper was able to obtain a sticker from the University of California, Santa Cruz, from his mother, since she worked there, allowing him to pick up Rosalind Thorpe and Allison Leo, who he would kill immediately in the parking lot. Wrapping their bodies with blankets, he passed through university security undetected and drove back home, raping and dismembering the two girls once again. His last two killings would be on April 20th, 1973. Kemper and his mother got into a heated argument, and his mother would eventually go to bed. While she was asleep, Kemper came into the room and bludgeoned her with a hammer and then slit her throat. He then repeated the process he had done so many times before, except he wasn't ready to dispose of her yet. He would also use her head as a dartboard and would throw her tongue and larynx down the garbage disposal. After he was done with his mother, Kemper called over her friend, Sally Hallett, in an attempt to throw off his scent when the police came to the crime scene. He strangled Hallett before hiding their bodies and fleeing the scene. Expecting a manhunt, Kemper drove all the way to Colorado, going nonstop using caffeine pills and prepared to defend himself using guns he had stowed away in his car. There was never any high-speed pursuit, though, and Kemper never heard his mother's death reported out on the radio. Disheartened and delirious, Kemper would pull off to a phone box in Pueblo, where he attempted to confess to everything, though he wasn't taken seriously at first. After he was finally taken into custody, he would record his confession for police in graphic detail and show them the disposal sites of several of his victims. Kemper's confessions took the co-ed killer murders from having zero evidence to all of it, leading to him being convicted of 8 counts of murder. Edmund Kemper's trial would start on October 23, 1973. Due to Kemper's very thorough confession, the public defender didn't have much to work with, so he pleaded insanity for Kemper. He would bring in witnesses to explain that Kemper was not responsible for his own actions, but the prosecution would debunk all of these testimonies. One major prosecution witness was Dr. Joel Fort, who, while reviewing case files, was the one to uncover to the jury the necrophilic actions he had committed on his victims. He would tell the jury that Kemper simply craves violence, sex, and attention, citing the fact that Kemper tried to kill himself in the courtroom with a ballpoint pen for that last part, and that Kemper did not have paranoid schizophrenia. Okay, we're gonna stop that for a second. I get you gotta say what you gotta say to get the conviction, but Fort was spewing some BS right here. Firstly, Fort had drugged Kemper during their interviews together using truth serum, which is just a colloquial for a type of psychoactive drug. And during that interview, Kemper would talk about cannibalizing his victims, one of the only confessions he ever retracted, which, kind of, discredits the entire interviews. Secondly, even if he wasn't re-diagnosed with schizophrenia after returning to jail, Kemper's behavior is very indicative of schizophrenia. So, before we get back to that trial, let's talk about Kemper's mental state. But first, a precursor, because we do not allow the making of generalizations or spreading of misinformation about mental disorders in this household. While Kemper is schizophrenic, his condition does not make him inherently violent, because the myth that schizophrenic people are violent people is just that, a myth. Yes, the hallucinations and more often the delusions they experience do contribute to a higher chance of committing violent acts than the neurotypical population, but does not mean they all act this way. That myth also heavily discredits the number of schizophrenic people attacked in their day-to-day lives, their suicide rates, and the lack of understanding and resources put into these people's mental health that greatly exacerbate any of their underlying conditions. That being said, Edmund Kemper's schizophrenia likely contributed to his violent behavior. As an abused child forced into isolation with undiagnosed schizophrenia, his chances of experiencing psychosis were much higher than 99.9% of the population. This could explain his violent behavior as a child, especially the murder of his grandparents, since schizophrenic murders are most commonly attributed to delusions in the person's head that manifest themselves while enraged with a family member. This could also explain the killing of his mother and many of the girls he killed, since he was living with her when he killed the latter 3, and them being the same gender could have resulted in delusions that killing them would be like killing his mother. As for the former 3, other delusions could have easily formed while being in a juvenile detention center during the ages of 17 to 21, where schizophrenic symptoms tend to be the most prevalent. It also could have been because he abused alcohol. Though he never directly said that, there was a lot of drinking mentioned in his confessions. Alcohol abuse greatly impacts the mind of a schizophrenic person, resulting in them being much more likely to commit violent acts. In the end, the specifics of what went through his mind while he was murdering people are unclear, but we do know that Kemper's schizophrenia was not an excuse, but definitely an explanation for his behavior. Edmund Kemper's plea for insanity would not work at all, and the jury would only take 5 hours to find him guilty of all 8 charges of first-degree murder. When asked what Kemper thought his punishment should be, he said he should be tortured to death. California had suspended capital punishment at this point, though, so he was instead charged with 8 consecutive life sentences. He was sent to the California Medical Facility in Vacaville for his imprisonment and is still alive, kicking it around there to this day. He's been denied parole numerous times, his next one up in 2024, but despite that, he's reported to be a model citizen at the prison. He's very open to talking about his crimes and has participated in many interviews related to them, notably with FBI agent Robert Ressler to help build up the serial killer profiling program they were working on in 1988. His openness with all of his crimes would also lead to Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs being inspired by him, and though wrongfully attributed to Ed Gein, another serial killer, would lead to American Psycho's Patrick Bateman, to paraphrase one of Kemper's lines.
When I see a pretty girl walking down the street, I think 2 things. One part of me wants to take her out and talk to her, be real nice and sweet and treat her right.
And what'd the other part of him think?
What her head would look like on a stick.
I don't really think this one deserves a Forensic Files ending type monologue, since there wasn't really any forensic science involved, so bye.